The barbell back squat is not only the most common back squat seen in the gym, it's usually the most heavily loaded. It's also one of the worst abused exercises in the gym. This is partially due to depth, partially due to a lack of hip dominance in the squat pattern, and partially due to ego lifts. Putting a lot of weight on a bar just feels so awesome, and it's hard to override that for the sake of better form and alignment. The setup in the back squat is going to be very similar in terms of the grip as the setup in the military press. So again, the taco hand, folding the elbows in to get the lats engaged. This time though, I'm going to step through and get the barbell racked on my mid traps or low traps if I can do it. If you get in there and everything in your upper back starts to cramp, you're probably doing it right. If you get in there and you feel some weird pinching or instability in the shoulder joint, take a wider grip. It's not time to challenge joint stability in the shoulder when you've got a lot of weight on your back in a squat. If you've got that sort of crampy, tight sensation, good, your upper back is probably ready to load. So it might be a hair wider grip, especially if you're using a low bar position on the mid back, the low traps, rather than on the upper back or mid traps. That high bar, low bar differentiation really is only the separation between a more quad dominant or anterior chain dominant squat pattern versus a more posterior chain or hip dominant squat pattern. The low bar position tends to favor the hip dominant squatter. Maybe your ankle mobility or thoracic mobility are suffering a little bit. A low bar squat allows you to treat it more like a sumo deadlift or even a kettlebell deadlift and makes it very hip dominant. A high bar position, it's actually going to be a little bit closer to a front squat in terms of where the loading goes. It's going to be a combination of hip and quad dominant. So here's our barbell back squat setup. Taco hand, corkscrew to elbows. Choose your bar position, whether it's high bar or low bar. Stand with the weight after a big belly breath. Step back and probably out, especially if you've got a more hinge dominant squat pattern. Press the hips back and knees apart as you grab the floor and suck in a huge breath. And then you're driving that wedge, which are the hips, between the bar and the floor. The low bar squat illustrates the wedge tremendously. The high bar squat, you've got two wedges really. You're driving the hips forward and the knees back at the same time. I'm going to take a little bit narrower grip. I'm going to put the bar a little bit higher on my back. Step back. Maybe my stance doesn't need to be as wide. Still pulling all the air in. With the high bar squat, my hips aren't the only wedge, but I'm probably not going to be able to handle the weight that I can on a low bar squat, making the hips more dominant and bringing the larger muscles of the body into play to a greater degree. In the rackless barbell series, you'll see a lift called the Steinborn lift, which is absolutely insane. Don't do it, unless you really want to do it. At first, don't attempt a Steinborn lift with the weight that you can back squat. Use a warm-up weight, figure it out, play around with it, slowly increasing the weight. If you're already back squatting proficiently at the gym, you might be one of those people who's gone out of your way to buy a squat rack or a half rack for your home. Probably don't need to do the Steinborn lift anyway. But if you want to, go for it. But don't do it, whatever you do.